Nancy Garr was the second oldest daughter of Fielding and Pauline Garr. Fielding Garr was the great-grandfather of Phyllis May Garr, and Nancy was married to Rodney Badger. Rodney Badger, son of John Badger and Lydia Chamberlain Badger, was born in Waterford, Vermont, February 4, 1824. He received Kimball, preached the doctrine of the Latter-day Saints in St. Johnsburg, Vermont, and converted the Badger family. They were baptized on July 17, 1835. In 1840, when but 15, Rodney's father, John, died and left 3 children, Rodney, John, and Zena May, with an invalid mother. After the death of John, Lydia and her 3 children moved to far west Hancock County, Illinois, where the mother died in 1844. Rodney was the oldest and had to assume most of the responsibility of the family support. He split rails at 12 cents a day to keep the 2 children in school. When the teacher learned of this, she would not accept fees anymore. Rodney married Nancy Garr on March 9, 1845. The following February 27th, at La Harpe, Illinois, a daughter was born to Rodney and Nancy, which they named Nancy Maria. Rodney was 23 years old, a strong, athletic young man of powerful physique, and a well-trained woodsman and frontier scout of the first order. He was expert in swimming and handled himself well in water. Brigham Young, in choosing his scouting company, the men who were to lead the way to the mountains, build the bridges, and blaze the trails, he chose just men for that. Rodney was instructed to have his temple work done at Nauvoo in 1845, preparatory for this work. It was early in April 1847 that they got started, and by the 20th they were settled to the route of travel with about 60 miles on the way. They were traveling about 15 miles per day, and by the last of the month they were in buffalo country. There they got what meat they needed. From then on, they were kept busy tending camp, caring for the animals, hunting buffalo, and guarding against the stealing of their horses by the Indians. When they reached the Green River, Wyoming, the 5 men were chosen to go back and help the Saints who had left winter quarters in June. Rodney was one of these. Provisions were scarce. Their supplies consisted of 8 pounds of flour, 9 pounds of meal, 6 pounds of beans. The rest they were expected to get en route by trading or hunting. They traveled as fast as possible, not taking time to hunt, and so were very short of food and nearly starved. Rodney came back to the valley with Amasa Lyman, Roswell Stevens, and Samuel Brannan. They arrived in Salt Lake City just 3 days behind the main body whom they were previously with. Here he helped and build the fort and made preparations for his family to come. A little while later, when Brigham Young left Salt Lake for winter quarters on August 26, 1847, there were 180 men with him. Rodney Badger was one of them. He knew his wife and baby were somewhere on the way, and he was glad for the opportunity to go back. He had been in Salt Lake nearly a month. They met Edward Hunter's company September 3rd at Big Sandy, on the 7th at Sweetwater, Jedediah M. Grant's company. Fielding Garr and his sons were bringing a herd of cattle. They had suffered heavy loss from alkali poisoning. The Indians had stolen many horses, and Rodney here found his wife and baby. The baby had been sick nearly all the way. He was happy to find them. They reached the Salt Lake Valley on October 2nd, 1847. Rodney lived with Hiram Smith and drove Hiram's carriage when he came to Missouri, so he's very familiar with the Hiram Smith family. At far west Missouri, Rodney and his father were called out to protect the Saints against the mob. And on the 29th day of April, 1853, 6 years after the settlement of the Salt Lake Valley, a short train of covered wagons loaded with strong-minded immigrants were lined up by rank at the edge of the Weaver River. The water is running fast and deep. The crossing would be dangerous. The governor of the territory, Brigham Young, had ordered Deputy Sheriff Rodney Badger to the location to assist the pioneers in fording the river. The 30-year-old deputy was a good choice for the job. He was an experienced lawman and captain in the lifeguard of the Nauvoo Legion. He had crossed the plains with the Prophet and the Saints. He was well schooled in the fundamentals of safety. When Deputy Badger rode up on his horse to the riverbank that morning, the first wagon was set to go. It was cleared for the passage and crossed the Weber without incident. The second in line moved in position. Badger and the wagon master inspected the rickety wagon that had a man and a wife and 6 children on board and concluded it was not sturdy enough to transport the 8 people through the rough water. The 2 men issued a stern warning to the father, ford the river alone. The warning was ignored, and as soon as the packed wagon entered the river, the strong current began to drag it downstream into deeper water. The driver lost his grip on the reins, and the wagon tipped over. The entire family disappeared from view. Deputy Badger had kept a watchful eye on the unstable prairie schooner. At the first sight of trouble, he threw off his greatcoat and gun belt and dived into the frigid water. He rescued the mother and 4 of the children, then went back to search for the remaining family members who had been swept further downstream. Although he was an excellent swimmer and in top physical condition, the elements finally overcame him. Apparently exhausted and suffering from hypothermia, the courageous deputy sank below the surface. Months later, when the swollen river receded, it gave back the remains of Rodney Badger. The merry father of 5 was returned to Salt Lake for a proper burial. The 2 missing children were presumed drowned. The bodies were never recovered. History does not record what happened to the father. Unfortunately, the public's memory of Deputy Badger's act of heroism dissolved as quickly as the population of the Salt Lake Valley grew. The name of this pioneer policeman was never included on the list of Utah peace officers killed in the line of duty. The descendants of this dedicated public servant had heard the story of what he had done. They knew of his heroism and waited patiently for the recognition he so justly deserved. The family wanted to display extreme. The family waited a long time. 143 years after he died, his relatives accepted the highest award given by the Salt Lake County Sheriff's Office. On April 25th, 1996, the Medal of Valor was awarded to Deputy Sheriff Rodney Badger for displaying extreme bravery in the face of danger. It was the About Time Salt Lake Tribune article. This came from the Salt Lake Tribune article, Monday, 22nd, July 2002. As you can see, there is a bronze statue that was raised on the Capitol grounds to recognize Rodney Badger as being the first person in the line of duty in Utah to give his life in service. After Rodney died, Nancy went to live with her father on Antelope Island, where he cared for the church stock. She assisted him for the work for 3 years, then he passed away. Bryant Stringham was appointed by Brigham Young to succeed her father as overseer of the church stock. Bryant moved to Antelope Island on the last day of July 1856, nearly a year after the Garrs had left. Nancy Bryant married Bryant Stringham in 1858. They lived part of the time on the island and part of the time in Salt Lake City until he passed away in 1871, leaving her a widow again. Nancy and Bryant had 2 children. After Bryant's passing, Nancy moved from Salt Lake to her daughter Charlotte's home in Holden.